What's going on, good people? It's your boy 3 Stacks in this thing, baby, representing Team Kings of Games. Oh, I got my Power Rangers for you guys, man. I've been waiting for this new support for a while, bro. You guys all know, if you follow my channel and you're not like necessarily, like I say, a new subscriber, you guys should know that I do play Super Quantums. I have done multiple variants on this deck, quite a few variants, trying to figure out the most impactful one. Just trying to figure out the best one. There is plausible, and I guess you could say, there is good cost to play Dangers in this deck because they are really strong in this deck. They have level 7s and 4s and 3s, which enable you to make the generic XYZs for the Super Quantums, which give you faster access to Magnus. But I decided to make a build that people wouldn't cry and complain about and drop all these hate comments just because there's Dangers in it. So I decided to go with pure Super Quantums. There is one implemented engine that kind of just... It's just a mandatory integration, honestly. It really is. It just gives me access to a one-card combo. But it's pure to an extent because it is Super Quantum Time Thieves, but it's not what you think. There's just portions of the deck that I just felt really helped it, where the Dangers would help it out. I needed a way to mitigate for that because the Dangers really did give this deck like competitive viability. And I just didn't want to do Dangerous Super Quantums as the first time I showcased the new support because people just cry about Dangers. Like, they just really... getting their feelings and tears start coming out. But let's go ahead and hop into the main deck. This deck's really strong. It has potential to be competitive. We just have to see what it does. You can't write it off as bad because the deck, like so many other decks that aren't really that popular, is really strong and it has the potential to be a contender. It's just representation and results are the only factors that can back this deck up to prove that it is exactly what it can be, because just because it has the potential to do so doesn't mean that that's how it's going to end up being. But with that said, it can definitely set up some really strong boards with several disruptions, a negation for monster effects, a trident for monsters, a Book of Moon, and an MST are all powerful in their own right. But what's more powerful is the fact that with the new support, this deck can make Magnus consistently off of 1 and 2 card combos. That is insane. Because Magnus himself is just a card that literally just hardly can be touched. You can't even scratch the surface of that card. Like, when you have a boss monster that says, hey, you can't search. I'm Colossus, but I'm 3600, and I'm unaffected by card effects, and I can shuffle anything I want from the field to the deck. You cannot ignore that kind of a boss monster. And if I go to the grave, I just summon 3 back from the grave so I can make another one of myself. That is nuts. And the fact that now with the new support, this deck can just make that, that's what gives this deck that high ceiling, that really high ceiling that most decks don't really have access to cards like that. And that's really what gives this deck the high ceiling that it has. Because when you're able to make Magnus, it's really, really strong. But when you're not, it's kind of fragile to a degree because those disruptions are not going to be enough against really good decks like Pendulums, Orcas, and, Sky Strikers and Salmon Grades. Sometimes 2 interruptions just can't do it. But with that all said, let's get into the deck profile, right? That's what you guys are here for. Starting off with 3 copies of Super Quantum White Layer, the White Power Ranger that we were all waiting for. Oh yeah, I got some sauce with this and 1 Alphin in my Herald deck. I was thinking about playing 1 of this and 1 Alphin because I could search this off Benton, discard it to negate, and then use his effect to search an Alpha and then discard that to negate. Like, I was just like, I don't know. I'm crazy, bro. I really think that my mom dropped me when I was a baby. But anyways, basically, you could summon him by sending a Super Quant from your hand or your field to the graveyard, and you could summon him that way. And then on summon, he has an effect where he can send a Super Quant from your deck to your grave, and he mimics the level of that. And I believe he also mimics the type. Let me confirm that. Yeah, that's right. He mimics the attribute and the level of the one that he sent. And also keep in mind, every Super Quant has an effect on summon and an effect on grave, and you can use both in the same turn. This guy just conveniently happens to have 3 effects, which is his ability to special summon himself, his ability on summon, and then if he's sent to the grave, he adds the best starter card in your deck from your deck to your hand. Anytime you get this card, your deck goes really nuts. It just gets out of control. Alphin is insane, you guys. I wish so many archetypes had a card like this. This card is just powerful in his own right. He can turn his level. Basically, you can target a monster on the field, make all monsters you control the level of that monster. You get to target a Super Quant only, and then every other monster on the field becomes that level. So, for example, let's say you have a field with like level 8 Dangers. You can target a level 5 Super Quant, and you can make rank 5s with all those level 8 dangers turning into level 5. So that effect in itself is really powerful, but that's nothing compared to his the effect that makes this card great. He can tribute himself and reveal 3 super quant monsters with different names from your deck. Your opponent randomly selects one. That one that's chosen gets special summoned. The other 2 get sent to the grave. What happens is no effects are being negated. It doesn't negate the effects of anything that gets touched by it. So you get to interact in the terms of using the super quant monster that your opponent picked. You get to use that effect on summon, and you get the effect of the 2 super quants that were sent to the grave because they all have graveyard effects, which is, again, why I was playing Super Quantum Light Swords, because I just saw the synergy. But yeah, this card is the ultimate starter. It gets a lot of your engine going, and it helps you out to circumvent for some of the problems where you need to see like every Power Ranger sometimes, and you need to resolve specific effects in the same turn. And just having him allowing you to resolve 3 effects that you needed is just really strong, considering that you do it off of 1 card. And I also play 3 copies of Red Ranger. Let me move this up. So these cards are not new support. So these came out in Wing Raiders. So these are pretty old. If you guys played Super Quantums, you should already know what these cards do. But for anybody that's new to the deck, because it's not very popular, this guy kind of just summons himself if you control no monsters. And he has an effect where if he's summoned, you can add a Super Quant card from your grave to your hand. And if he's sent to the grave, he's a monster reborn for the archetype. Except he can actually special summon a Super Quant in general, meaning a Quantum or a Quantal. He can summon the XYZs, and he can summon the main deck monsters from the graveyard. So he's just one of the best cards in general. He's, no matter what, you're going to get a piece of recursion from him. Whether you're adding a card from grave to hand, or if you're just special summoning a monster from grave indefinitely, he's always going to allow you to recur cards. And then next up, we have our searcher of the deck. We do have quite a few enablers. You know, like Alphen's a great starter card that can trigger searches. And then White Layer indefinitely just searches Alphen. And then we have a card that can search any Super Quant card from your deck to your hand, and also can recycle. So on summon, she has a Super Quant card whenever she's normal or normal special summon. And also she's Psychic, which is really cool. They all have like different types. And because she's a level 3 or lower Psychic, you can e-taily her. You know, you can 1-for-1 your Alphen. Really cool that they did that. But also, besides searching, which is actually really strong, because, you know, just having more searchers, but this being a searcher for any Super Quant card is really, really impactful, because you can add your field spell or any of the quantum names that you need. Sometimes whenever you're in a bind and you're staring at a practically unbreakable board, you can search out your Alphen Spike. We'll get to that when we get to that. But also her graveyard effect lets you recycle 3 Super Quant cards, shuffle them from your grave to your deck, and you can even target herself. So she is really imperative, because even in your first turn, you're going to burn through like 8 Power Rangers, and you're going to burn through at least one of each of all your XYZs and one of your Link. So now you just start needing to resolve her effect multiple times. So you kind of need to resolve one on your opponent's turn by detaching her, another on your turn, and you kind of just, after turn 1, you need her always. Like, you're constantly using her because you're never going to be able to get back everything you use. So you're trying to keep up and maintain your resources so that you have enough valid targets. But because the deck gets so fast and it really burns through its resources quick, she becomes, I can't pass this up. I have to make sure to remind myself to resolve Blue Layer this turn. Otherwise, I'm not going to have targets next turn. That's how important she is. And if you're being offended or getting butthurt over the fact that I'm reading the cards out or explaining their effects, please understand that there are some people that are watching this deck profile that don't know what these cards do. So please be understanding and reasonable, and also polite to the people that are watching this video that don't know what these cards do, because this is to help them. If you already know, that's fine, but please don't get butthurt over something that's not really going to hurt you in the first place. And then we have 3 copies of Green Layer, which actually has my favorite artwork. I love the way he looks. He's awesome. He's just like, look at me. Bro, look at me. He's green. That's my favorite color. And look at his art. He's just amazing. Like, this card, he makes me want to change my accent. You know, he makes me want to talk different, act different. I'm a different person at work whenever I see this card. He's just incredible. He really is. He basically, on summon, he lets you special a quant from your hand. And whenever he sends to the grave, you discard a quant card and draw a card. So he's draw power with an added bonus, because every quantal monster has what? Graveyard effects. So if you discard White Layer to draw a card, you'll get White Layer's effect to search Alphen, so you go +1. You discard 1 to basically draw a random card and then search a card you need. So you get 2 off of 1. which is really cool. So whenever you like have that interaction, you definitely want to maximize on it, because hand size in this deck is another contributing factor to your success, because you do a lot of discard for cost with your field spell. And don't get me wrong, with the Link monster, you just replace it. But when you're leading up to that point, there's a lot of resources that get expended, and you need at least 2 cards in your hand to make it work. Because one of them is going to be the field spell and the other is going to be discard fodder. So just keep that in mind. +1s here and there can really just help you progress your game state. This is the package that I was talking about. I'm not playing the Time Thief Regulator. Instead, I opted to play 3 Winders and 1 Bezel Ship. So what these cards do, I'm sorry, I apologize for that critter that got in the light. So what these cards, I live in Texas, bro. You know, these things happen in Texas. So what these cards do basically is like set up my board in the terms of extending to make a rank 4 of my choosing, which oftentimes, if I haven't made it already, I make Ouroboros. So how it works is whenever you have one of your Quanto XYZs, you're going to detach a material from it to summon Winder. Winder is then going to search you a discard fodder for your field spell. That's why it's really cool. It's the combo. It's for a combo that I made this combo. I made this combo up homemade. Just really cool. Whenever you have Winder in any of your Super Quanto plays that lead up to the Link monster, when you're trying to make Magnus, and you have this card in hand, you just detach from one of them, summon him, and you search Bezel Ship. And then you discard Bezel Ship for your field spells effect to XYZ using 1 quant you control, matching its attribute and type and all that good stuff. Once you discard this, you're going to draw off of your Link monster. Then you use this graveyard effect, detach a material from another XYZ, summon this, and overlay this in the Time Thief Redoer into an XYZ of your choice, which is going to be Ouroboros, which allows you to make Magnus a lot easier, because you got to make a rank 4 for free, because this paid for itself and these two got themselves on field, which is a free body. Then you make your Ouroboros and then you draw a card, so this replaces itself in more ways than one, and now you make Magnus with ease. So pay attention to this part of the video, because this is going to be the main reason why I play the Winder. And if anybody's ever curious about this engine and why I do it, that's exactly why. It solves a lot of the problems that I had with this deck with trying to make Magnus the hard way. It just makes things so much easier. And every time you detach this, it does not get banished because it never left the field. It was an XYZ material, meaning that this is just a piece of recursion that you can interact with and do whatever you want with it, really. Just kind of just manipulate it as a Link material and XYZ material. It's really strong. So I like the Time Thief engine. And it was just an idea that I kind of just came to a conclusion by myself. I really enjoyed it. And I like that I don't have to commit a normal summon to this. This is really good. And then the best 1-card combo in the deck. Oh, baby. It's got to be the plants. The plants, whether it's Lone Fire or Predator Plant or Fire with Scorpio, is a 1-card combo that can get you dang near to Magnus. If you hit the right card off Alphen, you can make Magnus. Because the Predator Plants in themselves are going to get you so many extenders. They're going to get you, you know, the white layer that gets dumped off Brilliant Fusion. You're going to get Seraphonite. You're literally going to search Alphen and commit your second normal summon to Alphen, and your board just goes nuts. It's just so strong. And you get to do free Link materials, so you get to leave both of these, really, if you want. You can leave both of them on the field. That means you can make a free Grand Pulse, and also if you have the Time Thief Redoer, you have a free Ouroboros, which means you literally just make the level 7 or the rank 5 XYZ, and you easily already have 3 Super Quantos with different names, so you can just make Magnus. And Magnus, by itself, game 1, people have to Boros Sword that card. And guess what? Because you know, a smart player knows that the only card that can out this card is Boros Sword. So I'm not going to shuffle anything unless it's Boros Sword. If they don't Boros Sword, they can't win. So, yeah. The plants are nuts. It's a 1-card combo that does more than any other singular card, even Alphen itself, can do in this deck. And then the bricks are Cobra. And then Alexandrite, I just like this card. I could play Garnet if I wanted to, but I just chose him. And then Trick Clown, which is another option if you ever resolve the white layer that turn. It's hard once returned, so another good option to send off Brain Fusion is the Trick Clown. And also discarding it off the field spell will still prop his effect. And he's a level 4, which allows you to make Ouroboros, which again, just keep in mind, anything that allows you to make Super Quant XYZs for practically free helps you to progress your game state to make your Magnus. And then for our spells, we have 3 copies of Call by the Grave. This deck can be very fragile in so many different points. And normally Ghost Ogre on the field spell is probably the most impactful and fragile point of the deck. It's not the beginning of the combo, but it's more or less when you're in the middle of it and trying to finish it off with your field spell, and your opponent ogres it. You're in a scenario where you either have to have another field spell, or you kind of just don't get to make Magnus, which means you pass with what you already had before they ogred you. So yeah, call by is important. 3 Pot of Desires. You need a spell that progresses your game state. That's a +1 because of all the discard for cost with this deck. This is the only quote-quote RNG card. Every other play you make in your deck, well, Alphen too. Alphen's like an RNG, so to speak. But every other play you make in this deck, you make it knowing full well that you know what the end result's going to be and you know what you're going to get out of it. And then we have 3 copies of Magna Carrier and 2 Terraformings because this field spell is kind of just what makes the deck, it really makes the deck go off. Because it allows you to make XYZs for 1 card. Before Zodiacs even came out, you had 1 card XYZs. And that is, for me, that's really helped me out because it's not as resource intensive. And that way you don't, because without the field spell, you don't have this scenario where you're like, okay, I need 2 level 7s, I need 2 level 5s, then I need 2 level 4s or 2 level 3s, and then I can make Magnus. And it just, even then, you still need the field spell. So it's just kind of like, no matter what, you need the field spell. It's really important. So you play 5 copies of it, and you have Blue Layer, so you have 8 copies of it. And you have E-Telly, so you have 9 copies of it. And you have Alphen, so you have 11 copies of it. And you have 1 for 1, so you have 12 ways to get to the field spell. 12 ways to get to the field spell was more than enough for me. And then more high ceiling 1-ups, I played Reasoning because I have so many different levels in this deck. Most people don't call the level right in the first place. When people start to see how the deck works, they normally start calling 3, but you could just easily side it out. Another high ceiling 1-up, Foolish. It does too much in this deck. All the Quantum Sub Graveyard effect, you kind of just pick which one you want. You can even send just Trick Clown at the worst case scenario. And then the 1-up Brilliant Fusion. Thank you, Thunder Dragons, for hitting one of my favorite cards to 1. And then this card, Alphen Spike. So what it does, basically, if you control 3 Super Quantals, you could shuffle as many cards in your opponent's field as possible into the deck. So you shuffle your opponent's entire board. And then they get to summon 1 monster from their extra deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. Normally, what you do, once they've summoned that, if you're able to, you try to use one of the Super Quantum Megazoids, because these are Power Rangers. Don't forget that, bro. You got the appropriate pilot and the Megazoid that partners and suits up with them. If you have the particular Megazoid that's needed that can interact with that, you can kill the monster that gets summoned from the extra deck off of Spike, which deters basically the drawback of this card, because it's really powerful, but it's just that you give your opponent a free extra deck monster. But sometimes you're in that scenario where you just wouldn't have won if you didn't resolve this card, so you kind of just played at the risk that whatever they summoned couldn't have been as bad as the board was before you shuffled it. Next up for the extra deck, we have 2 of the new Link monster. This card, yeah, we're 17 minutes in. This card is really incredible. You can recycle it with Blue Layer, but the problem with Blue Layer, while it seems like, okay, recycling 3 is good, I've been playing this deck for a long time. I've been playing it ever since it came out. This came out with the the Phantom Knights as well. Super Quantums and Phantom Knights came out in Wing Raiders. So, like, I've been playing those decks since they came out. And, like, I've always noticed that even before the new support came out, Blue Layer, you were never able to recycle enough with her. You never are. And whenever you recycle with her, you want to recycle the important cards. Like, you always want to put blue back with blue. So you never, ever have a blue engraved to be called by the grave now, which is really important that you can use blue to recycle the targets you need to make sure that you don't have a monster in your graveyard that you have on your field, so your opponent can't just be like, I called by, and now that's negated. You know, you just got to play smart. But basically, you're never able to recycle enough with blue, and that's the reason why I play 2 of this, long story short. But this card is really powerful in its own right. It can't be destroyed by card effects. Every time you summon a Super Quant XYZ monster to a zone, this card points you from your extra deck, you get to draw a card. The draw effect is not once returned. You can draw as many times as you can, basically. Normally, it's 4. It can be 5 if you summon Magnus that turn, which is really cool, but normally it's 4. And the reason why it's 4 is because you can summon to all 3 of his zones and then use him and 2 of the other ones as link materials to summon another one when your hand is that good, and you keep summoning him in his zone so you could just keep drawing through your deck. So whenever you side deck with this card's going to allow you to draw into your side deck cards really effectively, because the minimum you'll draw is 3, and drawing 3 is not bad. And then whenever Super Quantum dies by battle, he can special summon a different one, I believe it is. He special summons 1 Super Quant monster from your deck with the same original attribute as one of those destroyed XYZ monsters, which is really powerful because the monster you summon gets its effect. So yeah, he's nuts. He's like a baby Magnus, but Magnus is still better. Magnus, I already explained exactly what he did in the middle of the profile if you guys paid attention to that. So yeah, You guys should know what Magnus does. Magnus is a great card. He really is. Magnus is just incredible. Next up, we have 2 copies of each of the baby Megazoids. The reason why I play 2 is because of the problem with Blue Layer not being able to recycle enough. And they come up more. Like, for example, this deck can play generic XYZs. And don't get me wrong, there are some great generic XYZs out there. This deck can make rank 7s, rank 5s, rank 4s, and rank 3s. You know, it can make all those ranks. So don't limit yourself with the extra deck, you know, like I did. Like me, I wanted to keep it pure, and my focus is Magnus. I feel that there's no better card to make than Magnus. There's nothing that's going to be better. Not even an Abyss Dweller can match a Magnus. So because my deck's kind of Magnus-oriented and is focusing on turboing it out, you have to play multiples of these because you need 3 different names to summon him. And whenever you summon him, you've burnt through that many resources, meaning that the other copies in your extra deck are the ones that you actually use. You summon them and interact with them. And am I making sense? They're the ones that, because the ones that you're summoning to make Magnus, you're not going to get to capitalize off their effects because they're immediately going to be transferred as XYZ materials. But the extra 1 copy of each of them in your deck are what you end up getting to summon to actually use on your opponent. And also, these are just the best XYZs that this deck can make because they get spell speed 2 effects whenever they have the proper pilot. Ouroboros' pilot, it's so obvious. You match the colors and you understand. Ouroboros' pilot is green layer. His pilot's red layer. This pilot is blue layer, and his pilot's white layer. And Magnus is the super Megazoid. If you've watched Go Power Rangers, you know that all their little Zoids combine to form one great Megazoid, and that's what he is. Great King, Super Quano, Mecha King, Great Magnus. And then this is a spicy tech. I'm playing 1 Paradise Smasher. Basically, you guys know what that new field spell does? Yeah, the field spell was already made in the form of an XYZ before, you know, just like in general. Before even True King of All Calamities came out, this card actually was like there, you know. I'm sorry, I think Calamities came out first because this is a Battles of Legend card. But yeah, basically he's Calamities. You detach from him and you roll a dice. Both people roll a dice. I think you roll 2 dice if I'm not mistaken. Whatever the highest result is, I'll just read it to you because it's a really interesting card. But basically, I like it because it's the only real play that I can make outside of Magnus where I know that I can get myself an extra turn. It's risky, but whenever you commit to this play, you commit to it knowing like I didn't have anything better. So if it comes back to bite me, it's okay because I was probably going to lose if I didn't get to resolve this. But basically, it requires 2+ level 5s. Once returned during the main phase 1, detach 2 materials from this card. Each player rolls a 6-sided die twice. You roll 1 die twice. The player with the higher total, and that I like that you roll a 6-sided die twice versus rolling 2 dice. That means your opponent has to take this and roll it twice, which just it's better for me because the luck thing. And then the player with the higher total cannot activate monster effects or declare an attack until the end of the next turn. Once per turn, if either player rolls a 6-sided die, while this card has a material, so you don't have to detach, you can treat one of the results as 7. So the idea is to make this with 3 level 5s. How do you do that 3 stacks? Quanto Alphen. Remember how I told you Alphen can target any Super Quanto on your field and make all other monsters on your field that level? You can target Red Layer and make all other monsters on your field level 5s, and you overlay them and transfer them as materials into him, and then you activate his effect. You roll a die twice, and then basically, if you read it, it says right here, you can treat one of the results as 7. And you know why that's busted? Because 6-sided dice don't have a 7. That's why that's broken. So your opponent's gonna roll a dice twice, and if they didn't roll higher than you, you can just use this effect to make the lowest that they rolled a 7. So you're 80% chance, 80% of the time you're gonna resolve this, and you're gonna put your opponent in this stipulation where they can't play Yu-Gi-Oh. It's the same thing as having the field spell, the new one that came out, the Mystic Mind, except this is a lingering effect, and you resolve it on your turn. So even if this card leaves the field and they kill it, you can't get out of the effect, basically. It lingers until the end of your opponent's next turn. So if it is resolved and your opponent doesn't negate it, there's nothing that they can really do. So they just have to give you that turn. So you got yourself another turn, and that's what's really important. It's better than Baguska. And then 1 Redoer. I like it. I love Redoer a lot. It could have been Dweller. It really could have. Like, honestly, my extra deck can be so much better, and I have all the cards that I would play if I wanted to make it better, but I just really wanted to show how it would look pure. You know, pure Super Quantums, just relying really, if you look at my extra deck, I rely on the Super Quantums to do everything. Because I really just wanted to kind of showcase the power that these cards have by themselves without using generics. But I definitely would play generics in another version. And to explain the new XYZ, because I didn't, all the other XYZs are older, so you should know. But basically, let me just explain them in very simplistic terms that most people would get. This basically, Trident for monsters, MST on legs, Book of Moon, Effect Veiler on legs, okay? And this, Masterpiece on crack, Towers on crack, on steroids, and then pumped with heroin. And that's the deck profile, you guys. Thank you so much for watching it. God bless you guys. Make good choices. Don't hurt your brain cells. Stay tuned for future content. You folks have a beautiful day. And there was one small thing I forgot to mention. This has a graveyard effect where you can banish it in an Alphen from your graveyard and activate a carrier from your deck. But with that said, I think I've covered all the grounds and got very thorough on this. For those of you who don't play this deck, I think now you've kind of learned a lot about this deck. And thank you guys so much again for watching. Peace out, yo.